One shortcut, one bad decision, one mountain that never forgives. That's all it took. Every year, climbers arrive at the top of the world convinced they're prepared. They've trained, they've paid, they've dreamed of this moment for years. But Mount Everest doesn't care about dreams, money, or confidence. Today, these are 5 of the dumbest ways people died on Mount Everest. Not dumb because the victims were foolish, but because a single, avoidable decision turned a survivable climb into a fatal one. The bathroom break that became a death sentence. It was May 2017, high on the South Col route of Mount Everest, just below the summit. The sun was up, the sky was deceptively clear, and climbers were pushing through the final hours of an exhausting summit bid. The man was an experienced climber, part of a guided expedition. He wasn't reckless by Everest standards. He had oxygen, he had support. And at that moment, he wasn't chasing glory. He just needed relief. Hours inside a down suit, clipped to fixed lines, unable to stop easily. His body finally forced the issue. The plan was simple. Step slightly off the route, unclip for a moment, handle business, and rejoin the line. Climbers do this more often than people like to admit. At high altitude, dignity disappears fast. What he didn't realize was that he had chosen the worst possible place. The slope beside the route looked firm, packed by wind, but what lay beneath was a thin crust over deep, unconsolidated snow. Snow sitting on ice. Step 1. He unclips one carabiner. Step 2. He shifts his weight to the side. Step 3. The surface collapses instantly. There is no slow slip. No time to react. The mountain gives way beneath his boots, and gravity takes over. Other climbers hear a shout, cut short almost immediately. His body slides, then accelerates, then vanishes over a drop-off below the South Col. The fixed rope remains still. The line of climbers freezes. Rescue at that altitude is nearly impossible. Guides scan the slope below, but there's nothing to reach. No movement, no response. The fall was fatal within seconds. Later reports listed the cause of death as a high-altitude fall after leaving the established route. The aftermath was quiet. No dramatic investigation. No headlines beyond climbing circles. Just another reminder added to Everest briefings. Never unclip unless your life depends on it, because on Everest, even a bathroom break can kill you. But the next death wasn't about stepping off the trail. It was about refusing to step back. The summit photo that cost him everything. It was May 2019, during one of the most infamous traffic jams in Everest history. The summit ridge was packed, dozens of climbers stacked shoulder to shoulder, waiting their turn to stand on the roof of the world. The man was in his late 30s, a first-time Everest climber. He had trained for years. This climb was the achievement of a lifetime. Family and friends were tracking him back home, waiting for that photo from the top. By the time he reached the summit, he was already in trouble. His oxygen was low, his movements were slow, but he smiled for the camera anyway. The photo exists. It shows him standing tall, arms slightly raised, Everest's summit behind him. That image would later circulate worldwide. What he didn't realize was that he had arrived too late in the day. On Everest, timing is survival. Climbers are drilled with one rule above all others: turnaround time. Miss it and you turn back, summit or no summit. He stayed too long. Step 1, he lingered for photos, waiting for a clear shot. Step 2, his oxygen tank dropped toward empty. Step 3, the descent traffic slowed to a crawl. Above 8,000 meters, the death zone, the body cannot recover. Every minute drains strength. Every breath steals energy instead of restoring it. Other climbers noticed he was moving strangely, stopping, sitting, staring into space. Classic signs of altitude sickness turning dangerous. Guides urged him to descend faster. He nodded. He stood up. He sat back down. At some point, he ran out of oxygen completely. Climbers passed him on the way down. Some tried to speak to him. He didn't respond coherently. Nobody could stop long enough to help without risking their own lives. Eventually, he simply stopped moving. The official cause of death: exhaustion and altitude-related illness after summiting too late. His body remained on the mountain, visible from the route for weeks. Climbers walked past him, stepping carefully around the remains of a man who had reached his dream, then died because he wouldn't leave it in time. The photo lived on. He did not. But timing isn't the only thing Everest punishes. Sometimes, it punishes pride. Refusing oxygen to prove a point. It was May 2016, high on the North Ridge route from Tibet. Conditions were harsh, but manageable. Winds were rising, but summit bids were still underway. The climber was well known within his expedition. He was vocal, confident. He wanted to summit without supplemental oxygen, a badge of honor among elite mountaineers. Plenty of climbers do it successfully, but they also understand when to abandon the attempt. He did not. Early signs appeared hours before the summit push: slurred speech, poor coordination. Guides noticed him lagging behind, taking long pauses, struggling with simple tasks. They warned him. Strongly. What he didn't realize was how quickly hypoxia was eroding his judgment. Step 1. He ignored the advice. Step 2. His decision-making deteriorated. Step 3. He misjudged terrain he had already crossed earlier. Near a steep section, he stumbled. Not a fall, just enough to drop him to one knee. That alone wouldn't have killed him. But at that altitude, the body has no margin. His breathing became erratic. He tried to stand and couldn't. Climbers clipped him to the rope and attempted to assist, but without oxygen, his condition worsened rapidly. Within minutes, he lost consciousness. Rescue options were limited. Carrying a full-grown adult at that altitude is almost impossible. Helicopters can't reach that high. And stopping longer endangered everyone else. He died where he collapsed. The official report cited altitude-related cerebral edema compounded by refusal of supplemental oxygen. In the aftermath, debates flared online. Was it brave? Was it reckless? Should guides have forced intervention? But Everest doesn't care about philosophy. It only records outcomes. And the outcome was a death that could have been prevented with a single piece of equipment. But the next death wasn't about pride. It was about something far more dangerous: confusion. Mistaking the descent route and walking into nothing. It was early June 2012, near the Hillary Step, late in the day. Clouds were sliding in from the west, thinning the light and swallowing contrast. Visibility was dropping fast, the kind that turns familiar terrain into guesswork. The climber had summited earlier that morning. The hardest part was supposed to be over. On Everest, that belief has killed more people than storms ever have. He was exhausted, low on oxygen, and mentally drained after hours in the death zone where the brain slowly stops protecting itself. As he descended, he reached a junction where fixed ropes had shifted during the season. Snow had been trampled, reset, then erased by wind. Nothing looked clean or obvious anymore. Climbers ahead had moved through quickly, leaving behind footprints that suggested a safe continuation. What he didn't realize was that those tracks didn't lead back to the route. Step 1. He unclipped briefly to reposition, a routine move he had done dozens of times before. Step 2. He followed footprints drifting slightly left, trusting that someone ahead knew where they were going. Step 3. Those footprints simply ended. In whiteout conditions, depth perception disappears. Slopes flatten visually. Drop-offs hide in plain sight. The mountain stops looking three-dimensional and becomes a blank sheet. Witnesses later said he paused. He leaned forward slightly, trying to read the terrain. Then he took one more step. There was nothing there. He fell hundreds of meters. No one saw him land. No rope could reach him. No rescue was possible. Later analysis confirmed the cause of death as a fall after deviating from the established descent route. No bravado. No thrill-seeking. Just exhaustion forcing a bad assumption at the worst moment. On Everest, a wrong turn isn't a detour. It's an exit. But the final death on this list is the one climbers whisper about, because it involved doing everything right until one unbelievably bad decision at the worst possible moment. Taking off the mask in the death zone. It was May 2006, just below the summit of Mount Everest. The climber had been fighting the mountain for hours, pushing through thinning air and burning muscles. His oxygen was flowing. His equipment was intact. On paper, there was no reason he shouldn't have made it back down alive. But altitude sickness rarely announces itself in obvious ways. At over 8,500 meters, the human brain is no longer reliable. Oxygen deprivation doesn't arrive with panic at first. It arrives with confusion. Thoughts slow. Doubt replaces logic. Small problems feel urgent, even when they aren't real. At some point during the descent, the climber became convinced something was wrong with his oxygen mask. What he didn't realize was that nothing was wrong at all. Step 1. He adjusted the straps again and again, tugging at the seals, certain the airflow felt different. Step 2. That doubt hardened into belief. He was sure the oxygen wasn't flowing, even though the system was working. Step 3. Acting on that false certainty, he removed the mask completely. Nearby climbers immediately reacted. Voices cut through the wind, telling him to put it back on. Guides tried to intervene, reaching toward him. But hypoxia had already hijacked his judgment. In the death zone, the brain cannot recognize its own failure. Without oxygen, collapse came fast. He slumped into the snow, breathing rapidly at first, then shallow and uneven. Attempts to refit the mask failed. His hands no longer responded to commands. Fine motor control vanished. His body began shutting down system by system. Within minutes, he lost consciousness. The official cause of death was listed as hypoxia, following the removal of supplemental oxygen at extreme altitude. The aftermath rippled through the climbing world. Training protocols were revised. Guides emphasized one rule above all others: never trust your own thinking in the death zone. Because Everest doesn't usually kill you instantly, it convinces you to do it yourself. Mount Everest doesn't need avalanches or storms to take lives. Sometimes all it needs is impatience, or pride, or a single bad step. These deaths weren't caused by monsters or madness. They were caused by moments, brief lapses, where human instinct collided with an environment that offers no forgiveness, no photo, no summit. No point to prove is worth a life. If this story pulled you in, there's another waiting, one where survival came down to seconds. Watch next.